Hi, and we're live. Hopefully you can hear me okay. This is a live stream, and I've decided to do this as a part one because one of the most, probably the most that I get asked the most on the internet, the most is we want a rig rundown. How have you got your EURORACK modular setup? How do you play live with it? Can you take us through it? So that's what this live stream is about. This is part one of that, and we'll take you on what's been quite a long journey in putting this together, in designing the system. I want to talk about why I've done it. I want to talk about you know, all the reasons behind that. I want to talk about the case, the power. I'll talk about the modules, envelopes, the sequencing. And in part two, I'm then going to plug it all in together. I'm going to do part two tomorrow night straight away, just get straight into it. And that's when I'm going to plug it all in and you're going to hear some of it in action. Today, you're not going to hear anything. I just want to run through these things and I want to answer any questions. So anyone who's joined us live today, I want to say thanks for that because you get to ask any questions as we go along. Who have we got in the chat? Let's have a look. Paul, hey, how you doing? And yes, you've asked if I've got a modular grid page. Yes, I have. I'll share that with you. I've got some images of some old rigs as well that I've set up. Hey, Omri, how you doing? Nice to see you. Thanks so much for supporting us. Check out Omri's channel. I'm sure you all do. It's amazing. Hey, Martin. Who else? Inky, how you doing? Nice to see you. Some really good faces. Usual lot. Andrew, nice to see you as well. And what else is there? Who else is in today as well? Broccoli, hey, how you doing? Nice one. Cool, so let's jump into it. In fact, just before we do, one thing that I want to do with you is just tell you a little bit of news. Tomorrow, I've got a new single coming out. If you don't know, I'm releasing one new single every month for the whole of this year. It's kind of been like my lockdown project, if you like. They all go out on Bandcamp first. Before they go onto streaming sites. They go onto streaming sites a couple of months later and that kind of thing. So if you're interested, I've got a track dropping tomorrow called Control. I just thought I'd share a little bit of this with you, so check this out. Yeah, catchy little number, nice and chilled, that one. I really like this one actually. It was what the first track actually that I wrote on this system that I'm going to go through as well today. So everything that you're hearing on that track has come from this system. And if you want to support me, by the way, you can do so on Bandcamp, and on here. This is where I put all my tracks first. There's some remixes. There's a few of you who are VIP members, and for £3 a month you get all the new singles, and there's loads of audio up there that's been mastered from live streams, from performances, remix, a whole album as well that I did under my original name, Matthew Hodson. So thanks everyone who support me on that, and keep an eye out on that. As the new song will be dropping tomorrow as well. Right, let's get into this and what we're all here for. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat room as well, so I'll try and do that as well. Inky talking about vinyl. You never know, at the end of the year I might put all these tracks out on vinyl. Anyway, so let's see. And Andrew, thanks as well for the Sonic State album. I contributed a track to that. I should mention that. Go check that out as well. It's also on Bandcamp. Right, you want to know about my system? Okay, let's get into the system then. First thing first, I guess I want to say why. Why did I, someone who uses EURORACK Modular, where essentially they're designed to be modular in that you're constantly repatching them, playing around with them, moving things around. Why would I want to build something that's essentially fixed, stays the same, and kind of goes against that ethos of modular? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. The first one was when I started going out and playing live, I got fed up of changing modules around and pulling them in and out, and the amount of that I've actually blown or damaged because I didn't fit them correctly. Yes, I've done that too. So I wanted to get rid of that. I wanted to have a consistent sound whenever I'm playing live as well. I want to be able to turn up somewhere, open the lid, and I just want to have that sound that I feel like I'm getting that sound now. You know, if you go check out my music on Spotify and Apple Music and Bandcamp, I think I'm starting to get sound. I'm getting a vibe that's kind of consistent, and it's taken me a while to get there. So I want that. I also want something that's portable. I want something that I can take on a plane with me, and it not be an issue. I can't take something like this big thing on a plane with me. It's just not doable, is it? So they're the main reasons. The other one is as well, I wanted to make an instrument. And I really feel like I've got something here that I connect with as an instrument. It's something that I play, and I know its nuances, and I think that's important for me. And a lot of this is about me. You guys have asked me to do this. I'm doing this for you. I'm happy to do this, but I want you to all understand that this is something that I've designed for me in a way that I like it to work. I also want something that's restrictive. I want something that isn't endless. I want something that gives me a framework to work within, because I found over the years I work better when I've got restrictions and I'm working in a smaller kind of framework, if you like. Having said that, this is still what I would call a very powerful and flexible case. So let's jump over to it and you can have a look at this. And if you have any questions as well, please do ask. So this is the system. This is what it looks like. Like I say, in the chat, if you have any questions as we go along, please do put them in there. First of all, I'll start by the case. It is a 7U, 104 HP. It's a very light case. It was designed, and these were made by Ross Lamond when he was making cases. And it's just kind of like plywood. It's very light, but very robust, very sturdy. It's got some metal fixings on it. It's got little rubber feet. It stands up, it lays down, it's got a handle on the top. I can put a lid on this, and it allows me to get on a plane with it all pre-patched, open it up when I arrive at a gig, just tune up the oscillators, and I'm good to go. That's the case. Inside the power, there are 3 tip-top audio studio buses. I like those. I've never had a problem as well with those, so I'm quite happy with those power supplies in there. They're all kind of daisy chained together. I just fitted those myself. Ross was actually, I believe, just doing 6U cases, and I asked for a 7U, so I'm not sure if I was the first one to sort of badger him into doing that, but if I did, Ross, thank you so much, because having this extra 1U here, which I've decided to put in the middle, has really allowed me to, I don't know, have this extra section that, you know, without it now, I'd be really gutted if I didn't have it. So I'm glad I managed to twist his arm to get him to do that for me. I'm just looking in the chat room, see if there's any questions so far as well. No, okay, we're all good. So let's have a run through what I've got in here. And the first thing that you'll notice, I've got no VCAs. And well, actually there's one in this filter here, the Squawk Dirty by Endorphins. There's a VCA in there. That's it, I believe. There are no VCAs in here as far as I'm aware. And why is that? Why is that, Matt? Well, the reason for that is I'm not one of these people who uses VCAs and filters in combinations. I actually use filters more like VCAs. So what I mean by that is that I'll run an oscillator through a filter, like a low pass filter, and I will open and close that in the same way that you would with a VCA. It sounds different from VCA. It's probably not as clean. In some cases, the filters don't open 100% when you send them an envelope to open them. But that's okay. That gives me a sound. That's a sound that I'm kind of happy with. I suppose if I had more space, I might put some VCAs in here. I do have some IntelliGel 1U VCAs that would fit in here, you know, in the 1U section quite easily, and that would be useful. But for now, actually, you will see there's no VCAs, and I have just got filters, and it's these filters that I use to open and close the sounds. And the filters, let's start with the filters. The first ones I've just had these built for me by a really cool guy. And these are the MS22, Steve's MS22 filters, which give you a high pass and a low pass. They distort really nicely on the input. They've got two CV inputs as well that are kind of assignable, and they scream as well if you want them to. So they're very, very versatile, but very small modules. I might actually get some different dials for these because they are very close together. So I have one down here for this oscillator and one for this oscillator. The other filter that I have over here is the WMD carbon, which I run the braids through. And the reason for having the carbon and not these ones, I just found that the braids oscillator that I use within here actually sits really nicely with this filter. I don't know why, but one of the things that I've realized on this journey is that I spend a lot of time actually trying to marry up oscillators with filters, because some of them, to my ears, don't always marry up well. I don't know, there's something that doesn't quite sit with some of them when you marry them up. So I've found that this combination works for me. They're pleasing to my ears. They just kind of work. And this carbon as well gives you a lot of different outputs. It's also got 3 different modes of distortion in there as well. Andrew Brooks is asking, why is that, Matt? I'm not sure what you mean, Andrew. Ask me the question and I will answer. So the other filter that I have is, oh yeah, the Endorphin Squawk Dirty. This is a stereo one. This is really cool, and it's got different types of filters in it. The resonance is really playable on this as well. I can really use the resonance just to push something that's going through it in the mix, just forwards and backwards as well in the mix. What else have we got here in terms of filters? On my master, the Overseer, WMD Overseer, which essentially gives you that DJ high pass and low pass filter. I just use it mainly just to take a little bit of the low end out at sometimes, just to take away that energy, and then you can disengage it and do those kind of like DJ drops, if you like, in there as well. Oh, Exor Electronics, hi there, nice to see you in here. As you can see, we've got the sequencer here, we'll talk about that. Oh, Andrew's asking, I just repeated the question, why are you asking yourself about not having VCAs, that's all. Oh, okay, I see. That's cool, man. Passing Badger, the case is a DIY one. I mentioned this at the beginning, built, designed by Ross Lamond. I put it all together, I painted it black. You'll see that at the start of the video. So they're the filters. I believe I've been, oh no, there's another filter here. Now, I love this one, the Happy Nerding VCF. And you see these available quite a lot. And I don't know why people don't use these. Again, it's stereo. And there's a reason for that when I talk about how this voice works here. What's really nice about this is that it distorts very nicely. And if you want to disengage the distortion, you just add a little bit of the resonance dial. And it kind of disengages that distortion that it has. And it just kind of, it's thick. It's a nice thick sort of filter in there. Now, I think that is it in terms of filters. And I'll explain more about why I've chosen these ones as we go through it. And also in the next video when you'll see me actually using it. So let's look at the oscillators. Top left-hand corner, we have the 4MS ensemble oscillator, which MATTHS has also worked on in collaboration. I was actually using the Schweiman VCO6 for a long time. I really liked that oscillator. It was gnarly, it was thick. I would patch itself into itself to get particular interesting results. This one though, I have to say, when I started hearing some demos of it, I was like, I've got to check this out. This is pretty mean. It's yeah, it's really cool. It does very nice low end stuff, but it's got tons of wavefolding in it. You can send 2 CV inputs as well, one into the pitch of it as you normally would, but you can also alter the root at the same time. And you can send those out of separate outputs as well if you want to. So you can have the root audio signal coming out of its own output, and then you can send the rest out of output B. And also you've got this thing called spread, so you can kind of do chords with it. It's really lovely, and this is like a continuous, it sort of blends between not octaves. I don't think it's octaves. I think it like goes through thirds, fifths, sevenths, and it's quite musical the way you can like move through the root of the signal that it's playing. It's really cool. So that goes into the MS-22, and they work really, really well together. And I can, again, with the MS-22, I can take a little bit low end off with the high pass and the low pass. I've got that in combination. It just works really, really nicely. The other oscillator, so this by the way, this oscillator I kind of use for like lead lines, because you've got the wavefolding. It allows me to kind of push and pull it away from sitting in the background, and then you can add a bit of wavefolding, bring it up in the octaves a little bit, spread it out using the kind of chord feature on it, and bring it to the very front of a mix, and then you can push it back away again by closing all that down. And then of course matching it up with that filter, you can add all this kind of extra raucousness through the resonance and the gain and that kind of thing on it. The other oscillator I mentioned earlier is braids, which I've got as the micro oscillator version. Again, I've had to go for small, and you do have to think about going small when you're in this sort of format to try and get everything sat into this case. And yeah, I really like this. I tend to use this just for driving bass lines, so I tend to use like the sawtooth from it. It goes into this filter here. I can add distortion to it. I can play around with the octaves as well, so you can assign this main dial to numerous different things, including octaves and wavefolding and that kind of thing. So I can it's really playable. The only thing I don't like about this version, I suppose, is these tiny little dials here, particularly on the fine and the coarse tuning. And find if you just touch them, it can make it wobble in and out of tune, and that's not a great thing when you're playing live. When you're playing live, you need things to be pretty solid. So I might get those pots swapped out on the tune and the course there, just so I just know that it's pretty solid. I actually only used to have one oscillator in here, the Schweiman VCO 6, as I mentioned earlier, and I used to route that to all different places, and it used to sound like I had 3 or 4 oscillators, but I wanted to play around with pitches more, so that's why I've added more into here. Jumping back, the last oscillator that we have is the Endorphins Godspeed, and this is the one that I got most recently. I really like this. Again, you can play around with the octave switching, which is important for me when I'm playing live. You've got 2 simultaneous outputs, in fact 3 if you want to use the sub as well. One of the things I love about this, absolutely love about this, and thank you for doing this, and I don't know why this doesn't exist on other oscillators, but you can press this button here called tune, and it will tune to the nearest A. So all I do is open it up, press that, and it sort of self-tunes itself. It's wicked. It's really, really cool. I don't know if that's unique to this or why it's unique to this, but I just think it's absolutely awesome. The endorphin stuff I've started getting more and more of, as we'll talk about in here, but I'm really happy with the way this actually works and how it combines with this. Now what I'll do is quickly talk about this voicing here, and maybe that's what you're asking Omri in the chat, what you're doing with the other modules. Well, this oscillator goes into this filter, so it gives you like a mono voice. But then what I do is I take this and I go into this DSP effects by Erica Systems, the Pico one. It's mono in and stereo out. So what that does, it allows me to take a mono voice and actually turn it into stereo very, very easily. And what I do is I just pump it through a bit of reverb, and what that naturally does is just turns a signal from mono to a kind of pseudo stereo, and then I've got a stereo signal, and I can then pump that into the Happy Nerding triple MF. I guess that's multi-mode filter. I'm not sure why it's triple M. Anyway, because you've got high pass, band pass, and low pass simultaneous outputs. So this creates a voice, and that goes to its own mix. And I also take just the output straight from here, the mono voice, to its own mix as well. I'll talk about the mixer section, which is up here in a moment. I then also, just for even more good measure, I take the stereo output from here and I drive it through this, which is the Ruina Vergio, I believe. Stereo in, stereo out, distortion, and it's really awesome. It just works really well with this voice. I've tried different distortions and this one works really well. The other thing is it's very playable. You can take away the high frequencies, the low frequencies, you can offset stuff, you can play around with the phase. It's got wave folding on it, and it's got this button here called smoosh as well, which just like, what I actually do is have that button held down all the time. It's a shame you can't press it and it just stays down. So what you have to do is send it a CV. So I actually take one of the outputs of an oscillator and go into the Doom here, and it just constantly has it on. In fact, I think what it's doing, it's because it's audio rate, it's turning it on and off very, very quickly. So you get this like weird distortion of the distortion being turned on and off. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. So there's a voice. There's a voice. Over here with the braids, there's the other voice. And then that's it really. There's the 3 main voices. Now I guess the other thing is that I have other voices which come from a sampler. So you can see here I've got the Bitbox Micro. And in this Bitbox Micro, this is where I will have drum samples playing back, percussion playing back, and I also send it MIDI from the Nerd sequencer into this, which allows me to play polyphonic pads. So I also have a voice in here, polyphonic synthesizer within the Bitbox, and it works really, really well. I'm very impressed with the way that works, and I'm very impressed with the way that the Nerd sequencer works with it as well. I can just send the MIDI output from this into here. Now you're probably wondering, well, where is the MIDI output on the Nerd sequencer? to get MIDI into here, the nerd sequencer comes with another expander which does the MIDI output. That is inside this case. If I was to take this out, in fact I'm not going to do it, but if I took this out, you would see the expander for this underneath here, and I've got it taped down so it doesn't move, so it can't go into my power or anything like that. And then here's the MIDI cables popping out of the case with this little space that I have in the 1U. So I have MIDI in and out. In fact, I have MIDI out split. So I have a MIDI splitter cable in there, which allows me to send MIDI out to the bitbox, and it also allows me to send MIDI out to anywhere else in my studio that I might synchronize up with the nerd sequencer, because the nerd sequencer is the brain. It is the main clock. So yeah, I have to travel around with some MIDI cables sticking out of my modular, but I can deal with that. So so there we go. There's still more. I want to talk a little bit more. I'm just looking in the chat room as well. See what we've got. Synth Addict, you're saying that the Bitbox Micro is small and powerful. It really is, actually. For its size, what it does, it allows me to trigger one-shots, play a polyphonic pad or piano. I can sample into it. It does granular as well. It's got 8 outputs, it's got 8 inputs, you've got your MIDI in and out as well, and it's got a touch screen which allows me to essentially do, you know, like Ableton type of triggering, to start and stop, I don't know, drum loops. It allows me to start and stop hi-hat loops, and a lot of my drums, by the way, you've probably seen in the background the Pulsar 23, which I sequence from the BeatStep Pro. And you might have seen in one of my previous videos, I did a video on how I sequence the Pulsar 23 from the BeatStep Pro. So the BeatStep Pro gets a MIDI signal from the nerd sequencer, so it's all synchronized up. I come up with some cool stuff on the Pulsar 23. I send the Pulsar 23 into this beast over here, which is, I've got distortions, I've got effects, I've got preamp distortion, I've got all sorts of different wave shaping stuff in here, and then I'll record it and sample it down into the Bitbox Micro. Job done. And what I'll probably do is a video soon as well, maybe next week, talking about how I process the drums from the Pulsar 23. I run it through this lot and sample it into the Bitbox Micro. So yeah, I don't know what to do without the Bitbox Micro. It kind of feels a bit like cheating, I suppose, because it's a sampler, but it's also my polyphonic synth. Now I did think about getting the Disting EX, which does polyphonic synthesis in a wavetable synthesis, but if I'd have had that, there was a couple of reasons why I didn't go for it. It's a great module. I think it's really cool module, but with all the other stuff that I needed to go with it, it would have took up more space than I needed. And I should actually go through the outputs of the Bitbox Micro. Actually, this is a good time to talk about this. Hey, Mr. Wiggly, thanks for joining us. Check out Mr. Wiggly's YouTube channel. He does something most Sundays now as well. I popped in and saw Dom in there as well. So thanks for joining us, Dom, and keep that going as well. So just quickly, the outputs of the Bitbox Micro, I take the left and right output 1 and 2, which also allows you to send reverb and delay out the Bitbox Micro. That's mainly my pads. And that goes into the Stereo Endorphins filter. I love this one. You get a high pass and a low pass separate dial. It's stereo in and out. You've got different types of stereo filters in there. Some of them are quite aggressive, some of them not so. And then that goes to a 2 HP reverb. So you get reverb from here, on your pad, through here, and then more reverb if I want it. And then that goes to its own mix in there as well. So Omri's asking, am I using the bigger case for sound design? Yes, I am. That's mainly my sort of sound design case. And yeah, I've got distortions in here. I've got some oscillators, and I've got different types of filters. I've got the Volt filter, which you probably know very well, Omri. I know you know Vault stuff very well. I'm quite happy. I'm quite impressed with this one. Yeah, other distortions. I've also got another sequencer in here, which is the Performer sequencer, which I absolutely love. And here's a little Brucey bonus from a video that's coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to show you how I sequence my sequencers with other sequencers. Now that's how you come up with some really cool ideas. If any of you are getting stuck of coming up with the same musical patterns and you're getting a little bit like, oh, you know, it's not really working for me, take a sequencer like the Performer and plug it into another sequencer and sequence one from the other and get them talking to each other in a way that maybe they shouldn't do. And I'll show you more in a video on that one. And that's how I can come up with some interesting ideas and that kind of thing as well. Back to the rack. I'm just going to have a swig of water. Thanks again for everyone who's joining us tonight. Okay, yeah, next up, envelopes. Really important. Envelopes are the key things that obviously shape your sound and give things that sort of movement within your system. I've got to have MATTHS. Not only is it because it's very similar to my artist name. Did they copy my artist name? I don't know. I don't know what they're playing at. I'm joking. I love MATTHS. It's so playable. And again, everything in here has to be kind of playable and performative, including the sequencer. And it, obviously, I don't need to talk about MATTHS, but you've got your 4 channels. I have channels 1 and 4 generates their own envelope shape. Channel 2, I send modulation data from the nerd sequencer and actually draw interesting shapes within the nerd sequencer, which essentially is an envelope. And I use that to open and close the filter. And of course, you can play around with these attenuverters as well. And get some really interesting shape by combining them or subtracting them from each other. Now channel 3 is interesting, and I'll show you this in the next video that I do when I show you about how all of this patches together, because I appreciate right now you're not hearing anything and I'm just talking about things, but I wanted to split it all up just to make it nice and clear for you all. So the next video will show all this patch together, but what's interesting about channel 3 on here is I actually take the envelope that is working with this oscillator over here to open and close the filter. So I take the envelope from this, the drive, remember it's the driving bass line, it's the voice that does the driving stuff, and I use it to subtract from here. So that means that I can push and pull things in the mix. I can have this naturally, as I say, open up the filter, it will turn this one down. So they're kind of like mixing each other. So I'm using MATTHS as a CV mixer, and it allows me to essentially move things backwards and forwards in a mix. Really, really cool. I'll show you an example of that in the next one as well. Paul, in the chat room, you've probably noticed, I think maybe you're mentioning that I haven't got any LFOs here as well. No, I don't have any LFOs in here. There are LFOs that you can generate from the nerd sequencer, and you can also generate envelopes from the nerd sequencer, and you can use them and send them out to different places. But I don't actually have any LFOs going on in here either. Where else are we on here? Okay. Oh yes. So we've got the U-Burst, which is clouds in a smaller HP. This is made by Michigan Synthworks, and I'm really impressed with the build on this. You know, I mentioned earlier about these knobs being a bit wobbly. These ones don't wobble at all, and they are the same type of dials, or maybe they're a better version of those type of dials. I'm not sure. And I run the whole mix through that, or I can run bits of the mix through clouds, and I do that using this little mixer here, the high or low by Knob Farm. It's got 6 inputs, so I can send the whole mix into 2 of the inputs. I can then send through the other 4 inputs like a voice, a kick drum, and then maybe like the pads from here or the drums from here. And then I got that combination of using the kind of lo-fi sounds that you can get from clouds. I don't really use it in a granular mode. I use it in the Parasite software version mode, which I basically run as the old school kind of tape emulation, but I'm not a tape delay, but I'm not using it as a tape delay. I'm just using it to get that grainy, pitch down, sort of lo-fi nostalgic effect. So that allows me to take a techno system, I mainly make techno, and ram it through that, and then I've suddenly got this kind of ambient, dark, ambient techno machine, if you like. So yeah, I really love it. I'm really like the sound of that, and I was playing around with it in EURORACK before I bought it, because it's the same thing, and it worked really well. Okay, I think we're nearly there. I want to talk about how I mix everything together, because this is really important, this section, mixing things together. And for a while, I was using these as my main mixers, the IntelliGel mix-ups, which are great modules, really good. I had 3 of these, and you can actually daisy chain them together using this cable. So you can take the output of one and feed it into the input of the next one, and it allows you to daisy chain them without using physical inputs on the front. So that means that you save inputs. I also like changing the colors of the dials as well, so I know what they are. Now, I was using these for a while, and then I looked into these Cockpit 2s by Endorphins and swapped it out. And the reason I've done that, if you don't know about these, I've got 3 of them, 3 of the Cockpits, and these are awesome because you've got 4 channels per module, 4 inputs. Those inputs can either be mono or stereo. So there's a little jumper on the back, and you can say channel 1 is stereo, channel 2 is mono, channel 3 is mono, channel 4 is stereo, or whatever you want. Awesome. So that gives me stereo inputs, and it also gives me a stereo output with a volume control. You can daisy chain them in the same way that you do with these IntelliGel mix-ups, using a bit of jumper cable. So I've got that one goes into that one goes into that one, and that's the master. Now this is the cool thing. This is the cool thing about these Cockpit 2 modules by Endorphins. And again, I'm praising Endorphins already, because earlier I was talking about they do the tune function on the Godspeed oscillator, which tunes things to A. What they do with these little mixers is that they have a sidechain input, and that sidechain input can either be your audio from your kick drum, it can be a trigger, so just a normal CV gate, sorry, just a normal gate, and then you can play around with the sort of length of that gate, or you can send it CV. So I could send like any sort of random CV, and it will use that as a sidechain input. So I've got a very powerful mixer here, 4 channels, stereo or mono, or any combinations of, with a sidechain input on them. And it allows me to mix them together. Now, the way that I've got these set up is that the first 4 channels are mainly my mono oscillators, and they're going to be sidechained by the kick drum. Just to duck them down whenever the kick drum occurs, I just get that nice little bit of, it just helps mix and gel things together. The second one is mainly things like the pads, the stereo distortion, this stereo voice going on here. And I'm going to send a different sidechain. I'm not going to send my kick drum to them. I don't want them to react and duck with the kick drum. I want them to react with something different. And I might just send like a strange CV shape to them and just make them move in a different way, a musical, rhythmical way, different from what these are being interacted with. And then the same here, I've got my kick drum going into the first one, and I can't remember what's going into the others, percussion maybe, oh, and the effects as well. And again, I'm probably going to have them with a different sidechain input as well. It's really cool that Endorphins give you these cables when you get one of these with it, basically per module of the Cockpit, and it's stereo to 2 mono, and you can use that for the input. So if I want to have a stereo input on channel 4, I'll plug that in there, and then I can patch 2 cables out left and right of whatever into there, and it's a stereo input. The other cool thing is that because I've got these daisy chained and I'm taking the signal from this one into this one and this one into this one, I still have these audio outputs on the front that I can use at the same time. So I can take a stereo out of that and I can run that, you know, into the mixer for clouds, for example. So I've got loads of inputs and outputs. I've just gone and bought a load more of those cables. I've just bought these, which arrived recently, and these allow me to do the same thing. So I've got as many as I need for this to make that happen. Now, just moving on and getting to the end, try and keep this under the next 10 minutes, is that I've got a stereo compressor here at the very top right hand corner, and this is the Muscle by WMD. And what I do with this is that, well, actually, first I'll explain. I've got a mixer after it, another high or low, which has got 6 stereo inputs. And what I do is I take the output of the main mix, left and right, into the first 2 channels. So I've got the main mix, turn it up, turn it down. I've then got the whole left and right going through this stereo compressor, which is cranked, and it's actually working more like a stereo limiter, and that goes into input 3 and 4. So I can do parallel mix processing of my final output, and that's how I get a nice big sound. Big, and you know, on a sound system, basically I can have the stereo mix just sat there nicely ticking away with a lot of dynamic range, you know, things being punchy, the dynamic range is there, and then I can just add a little bit more of the mix going through the limiter, bring in that underneath the mix, and it just fills it out, and it just gives me that consistent kind of very powerful stereo image. So that's how I'm using that. I'm using it basically for parallel limiting, if you like, on parallel compression as well. Okay, the last bit is the middle 1U section. As you can see, I've got some interesting stuff going on here. I've got the guillotine, which is a stereo distortion, and I send everything that's going to clouds. I go into the guillotine first. So I come out of this mixer into the guillotine, into clouds, and it allows me to distort the input going into clouds. And I don't know if you've noticed this, or maybe it's just this particular Michigan Synthworks version of clouds, but the input distorts really, really nicely when you push the inputs of that module. And I don't know if that's the code, the original code from Mutable Instruments, or if it's the A to D converters that they're using. I don't know. But when I found that by putting stuff through that guillotine and then ramming it straight into the input of clouds, it just distorts really nicely. And then you put it on that tape delay mode, and you've got this nice distorted input, and it's wonky and it's ambient, and it's really, really, really nice. So I use that. Moving along, we've got some effects. I use the Happy Nerding effects aid, and I've got them on their side. You see, they should actually be like this, like as a 3U. But I got these little panels, if you like, converters from Thonk by Abyss Devices, and it allows you to put modules, what's that, 6 HP on its side and slot it in to here, like so. So I've got this FX aid, which is my delays, this one doing reverbs. How do I get things into that? I use these little mixers. So I'll send the output of this little mixer into that one, the output of this little mixer into that one, and then whatever voices I want to send into the 3 inputs, I could have like kick drum, bass, and pads, and they feed into the delay. And then over on this one, I might have clouds, I might have percussion, and I might have the drive-in braids all going to reverb or whatever. Nice little handy mixers there. And this one, what do I use this one for? yes, to send into here. The last module we haven't talked about, which is another Pico DSP, and I run this for distortion. And what I do, I take the kick drum into channel 1 here, and I'm mainly ramming that in here, and it gives me that distorted techno kick drum if I want it. And then I'll send anything else that I want to send into distortion, like hi-hats are pretty cool into distortion with the kick drum. I might send reverb into the distortion, and then I send that back into its own channel as well. Last thing I want to talk about is how I'm mixing CV signals together. I'll just check the chat room here. Martin, do I have a link for the stereo to split mono cables? Yeah, if I do, I'll put it down in the comments. Oh, actually, if I might ask, just if you're here now and you're watching this, I'd really appreciate if you just gave it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for your support. I'd really appreciate that. And I'll put a link to those modules, to those cables in there for you, Martin, as well. Synth Addict, those 3U sideways panels are great. I get them from a guy in Canada. Yeah, they're really cool, man. I didn't know they existed. Here's a tip for you. If you've got the Beast chalkboard, the octave switch, that fits exactly into one of these 1U panels without using anything, so that's really cool. Any other questions here? Okay, let's talk about Omi's asking, can you talk a bit about the sequencer and how you use it and performative is? Yeah, I haven't talked about the sequencer actually. It's a good point, mate. The Nerd sequencer. I've had this now for 3 months or something, and I've tried them all. I've tried them all. I've tried the Eloquencer. I have tried the Performer. I have tried the Hermod. You name it, I've tried them. I've now landed with the Nerd sequencer, and there's a number of reasons for that. I don't know if you know the Nerd sequencer much, but it runs as like a tracker. So it runs in a very sort of, I want to say non-linear way, in that you don't really see things going from left to right, but actually from top to bottom, and you can move things around in interesting ways. I'm making it sound more complicated than it is, but it's a very in-depth and powerful module. Why did I get it? Number of reasons. One, you've got 6 trigger and CV outputs and another 6 modulation outputs as well. So I can draw interesting modulation curves and send them to things like an envelope in MATTHS, so into the channel 3 of Max, channel 2 of MATTHS, and use that to come up with interesting stuff, or open and close a filter using interesting CV shapes. That's quite interesting, you know. So you've got loads of outputs. In addition to that, you've got 2 more channels. You can actually put you can have samples coming out of these channels, channels 7 and 8. So you can have a kick coming out and a hi-hat coming out of one if you want, and you load them using this little micro USB. But I don't do that. I use them as the MIDI tracks, and those MIDI tracks are actually polyphonic. So you can send, I believe, is it maybe 4 or 6 voices? I think it's 4 voices. I think they're in the chat. They'll correct me if I'm wrong. Out of each one of those MIDI channels, and I use those MIDI channels to sequence the bitbox to get the pads and the chords coming into there. Basically, it's a super duper powerful sequencer. It's very, very tight and sample accurate. There's a couple of things that I've asked for since I've had it that I wanted to see implemented. So there was a particular way that I wanted the tracks to be launched when you hit launch and get them to ignore previous patterns and stuff like that. And I have to say that the guy, I've forgotten his name, I think it might be Steve, I'm not sure, who runs XOR Electronics, he's been really good, and he's put up with me quite a lot. I've been sending him messages on Instagram and stuff, and I'm like, oh, I'd really like to see this implemented, and I'd already like that to be implemented. And he's given it a go, and he sent me beta. I'm running a beta on this already, actually, and it's working really, really, really well. You've also got 4 CV inputs which you can assign to things internally. so I can perform with it in that way. So if I want to send an output of anything, I could send an output of a mixer. I could take the output of these dials into there if I wanted to, and I can use them. You can also plug in a launch pad. So if you like your launch pads, you can have your launch pad, and you can trigger sequences from that, which works really, really well. You can also use a Sega joypad, which it came with as well, which I'm not using. I can't talk now. XO Electronics, 4 voices with some tricks, 7 voices per track. 4 voices for the MIDI tracks for the polyphony. So that's really cool. Now there's other really deep stuff that the Nerd Sequencer does, and I've just started getting into something called tables, which are like mini sequences that you can have running at the same time as your normal sequences. You can basically take a table, which is like a mini sequence, and send it into another sequence that's running and interfere with it in strange ways. And I just love things like that because it's a great way of coming up with musical ideas. I don't like just like, you know, drawing in simple notes and then pressing play. I'm not inspired. When you've got things like tables to play with and you can get patterns interacting with other patterns, that's when the magic happens for me. That's when interesting stuff starts happening. What else is really cool? Yeah, you've got LFOs in there. You've got envelopes in there. Everything saves to an SD card. I think it's really tight in terms of its timing, so I've been really happy with that. Like I say, I'm also using the performer to sequence it sometimes. So I'll take outputs of the performer into the input here, assign it to things in the Nerd Sequencer, and hit go, and you come up with some really mad ideas. Right, last thing is CV envelopes. Envelopes. So I've got the Quadra and I've got the MATTHS here as well, which can all produce envelopes. And what I do is I take the output of some of these. So you've got 4 outputs on the Quadra, you've got 4 outputs or a sum on MATTHS, and I send them into these 2HP. You'll see I've got one here, I've got one here, and I've got one here. And what I do is, so input 1 might be envelope 1 from Quadra into there. Input 2 might be the output from MATTHS into input 2. Input 3 might be a modulation CV from the Nerd Sequencer. So what I end up with is 3 different envelopes going into this little mixer, and it allows me to mix between them. So I can have more of the Quadra, which is just usually like an AD, attack decay, and then I can have loads coming from MATTHS, and this one feeds this voice, this one feeds the stereo voice of this voice, and MATTHS feeds this voice. This one feeds the Braid's voice. So I've got loads of ways of taking envelopes and sending them and mixing them however I want them into the different voices. And that's when the magic happens, because what you could have all of the voices working with one envelope just the same, and then you can, on one of them, you can start bringing in a second envelope, and then you start getting this movement happening, and then you go to a different one and you bring in a different envelope, and then you get extra movement, and before you know it, you've just got like these really interesting movements going on. And yeah, you're just basically mixing envelopes in, or adding them, subtracting them into the filters, opening up those filters, and getting some really interesting shapes happening. Let's see, is there anything else we need to go through? Been through all of the modules now, I think. My camera's just suddenly gone a bit weird. That's a bit weird. I'm just going to check what that is. While I do that, I'm just going to remind you about... that's weird. Check that out. I'm just going to remind you about my release tomorrow again, called Control. Be right back. Okay, I think I've sorted out my camera. That was a bit weird. Don't know what it was doing then. Yeah, so just to remind you, I've got Control coming out tomorrow. Any other questions? Synth Addicts asking, is the Nerd Sequencer harder to use than the ER301? Oh yes, now I've had the ER301. Hang on. Let me just get my drink. I've had the ER301. And in fact, I lie, I've had it twice because I bought and sold it twice, and I just didn't quite get on with it. And my video feed's gone a bit weird. I don't know what it has. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I just didn't get on with it. It just didn't gel with the way that I work. It does for some people and they're doing amazing things with it, but it just didn't work for me. So I would say Nerd Sequencer's easier. The ER301 anyway, it's more than just a sequencer, it's an effects processor, although you do also have wavetable synthesis inside the Nerd Sequencer as well. Okay, any other questions? I'm just coming up to an hour being live, and thanks so much. There's 28 of you who've been watching this live with me. Again, if you can just give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and feel free to share this. That'd be really cool. I'd really appreciate that. Any other last questions that you might have? Matt and anti-matte or mid-side matte. Not sure what you mean. I'm not doing any mid-side processing. I am doing stereo though, and mono and combinations of. I think I'm really big into things like stereo bass. So I love sending, like I mentioned here, you know, I like sending a really nice low distorted sound into reverb and then stereoizing it and then sending it into more distortion. So really cool voice into a really cool filter, making it stereo and then through reverb and then sending it into distortion. Just sounds awesome on a sound system. Quantizers, Martin Taylor saying, do I use any quantizers? I don't really need to, mate, because the you know, the Nerd Sequencer is quantizing stuff for me anyway. So no, I don't really need to. And the other thing is as well, you might notice this about my music, but my music, I tend to just use, it's quite drony. It's kind of the same one or two notes, you know. It's very much just stays driving on a particular note for a long time. I don't program music where it's like do 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 do, you know. I don't move around like that, which is cool for some, but generally my music stays on one note. The only thing that changes is that's when I bring in the pads, and you'll hear this on Control, which comes out tomorrow. Is everything pretty much stays the same throughout. It's the pads that creep in and they change notes. I might just play around with the octave on the macro oscillator, and you can make some really cool arpeggiators inside the Nerd Sequencer if you play around with it a little bit using the tables or the LFOs and things like that. So I might arpeggiate a few things, but generally I find arpeggiate is a little bit cheesy. Let's have a look. Paul's asking, do you work with delays? Yeah, as I mentioned, the Happy Nerding Effects Aid, and again, if you don't know these are really powerful and very high quality. There's so many algorithms for this now. What I've done is loaded all of the delays ones into this one, and you just switch between them using the bank buttons here. So I could have like a tape delay for one song, and then I can go to like a mono delay for another one, then I can have a ping pong delay, then I can have a delay going into a shimmer effect. And the same with the reverb one over here. I'll have a shimmer reverb, then I'll have like a plate reverb. So I can really play around it and have different effects per song as well. These are very powerful. I think the reverbs sound very, very good. And I'm someone who's a big fan of Eventide and Strymon. And I think that these are very good, very musical. And yeah, I really like these. I should mention I've changed some of the pots here on these on the mixer here, the cockpit. And that's because I was just seeing if these little pots that you can get from Thonk work on this, and they do. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to order some which are going to go on here. And the reason for that is I just find these a little bit big when you've got cables in here, and these are a little bit taller, and so I'm just going to replace these with some colourful knobs. Also, if they're coloured, I know that like the yellow one is my bass, the orange one is my kick drum, and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's really it's really good when you're playing live to have colour coded stuff for sure. So yeah, I'm going to do that, and also on these envelopes as well. I'll probably also do that too. I was just checking what they were like on here. This is quite close for my fingers to get in here on this particular module. So I might actually change this module and put it upside down, the 2 HP module, so these dials are down here, which will allow me to control them a little bit easier as well. Let's see, any other questions? I was going to buy your tune, but the hi-hat sounds 5 milliseconds out. Mr. Wiggly, it's probably way out. The hi-hat on the new tune's all coming from a pulsar, and it's going through cloud, so it is slightly delayed, and it's in a different place than you think it would be. Any other questions? Glow in the dark pots. Oh, that's a good idea. I might get some glow in the dark pots. That might be quite cool. I should get some glow in the dark paint and put it on my head or something like that as well. FX aid rules and very reasonable. Yes, it is. I've ripped up the rule book. Yes, thank you. Oh yeah, M block. I should mention everything travels patched. It does. I don't want to turn up at a gig and start patching stuff. It travels patched. That's it. All I need to do is open the lid, turn it on, load up my sequence, and tune stuff, and that's it. The other thing is the nerd sequencer changes between projects very quick. So once I finish a song, I just go into project, go down, load up, and I can load up the next project very, very quick, and I'm ready to go as well. So yeah, everything travels patch. Just put the lid on. Yeah, it's really, really, really easy to get around. The other thing I should say is that the actual dimensions of this is done so that it fits in EasyJet as a hand luggage. So this comes on the plane with me. So when I play in Berlin, I played around the UK, and I've played in Germany, this comes on the plane with me as hand luggage, and my other bag with all my clothes in, that just goes in the holdall. So yeah, this sits nice and safely in the locker above my head, basically. So look, in the next video, in video 2, part 2, and I think I'm going to do that tomorrow night, so subscribe to my channel and get notified about that. I'm going to have it patched, and I'll take you through the individual voices and the sounds that I've been talking about as well, and we can go through that. I can show you how I'm adding and subtracting envelope shapes together. I can take you through the filters, the different voices, how I'm using the nerd sequencer with the bitbox as well, how the side chaining works on the mixers. We'll go through it, and hopefully this video is just giving you an overview of why I've chosen particular modules. I should say that this has been a long process. I've got little black books, you know, just full. These sort of books are just full of ideas and questions, and what if I was to have this sort of mixer, and what about that, you know, thinking about how much I can get into such a small case to make it powerful, to make it performative, and to make it portable. The 3 Ps. So yeah, we'll plug it in tomorrow as well. The case Murchie is 104.7U, mate. Yeah. Yeah, XOR Electronics, it's quite interesting when you turn up at a airport and you open this up and it's pre-patched with all the cables. They do give you some funny looks, I must admit. but I think people are getting into it. Martin, yeah, we'll do a video on taking a sequencer into a sequencer and show you how I do that kind of stuff to come up with musical ideas. I'll show you how I'm using a bitbox. I should also mention the bitbox, you've got filters in there. So it's got a built-in filter and it's got built-in effects as well. Andrew, you're welcome. Thanks, fella. That was really useful. Looking forward to tomorrow now and hearing it all. Yep, no worries, dude. And thanks for everyone for sort of, you know, going through this mission. If you go right back to when I started on doing YouTube videos, and I think you can see the sort of journey that I've been on and how I've been inspired by other people out there as well, and friends who I've seen doing this kind of stuff as well. You know, Mylar Melodies has done some good videos on his sort of techno system. He's got a different approach as opposed to using like a sequencer like this, which I really, really like. There's people like Obsidic as well, who, you know, that's been quite an inspiration of seeing what he's doing with his systems that he builds and creates tracks using that as well. So, you know, I've been inspired by quite a number of people to do this, and I'm glad I have. And I'd like to say that this is it now. I'm not going to change it, but we shall see. I'm probably going to now move on to designing, because I've got another one of these cases, and in that one I'm probably going to make a more generative ambient case, you know, that, well, I don't want to say like rings and clouds and all that kind of stuff. You hear a lot of that, you know, and it's, I like it, but you're hearing a lot of it, and a lot of people are doing that. I want to do something a little bit different with ambient, so I'm going to think about what I've learned from here, implement it into a second case. So if I want to turn up at a gig and do a proper sort of chilled ambient rings vibey gig, I can do that. If I want to turn up somewhere and rip the roof off, I'll use this one as well. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining us. Omri, Martin, Inky as well. Oh, Onchrono is asking, can I patch it from scratch? I could do, but it'll be a super long video and I think you'll get really bored. I think if I have it already patched, mate, I'll be able to show you more of the interesting stuff about how I'm using it, as opposed to finding the right cable and this, that and the other. And so probably won't do that, mate, probably won't, but I'll do some patch from scratch using this stuff with the Pulsar 23 and show you how to do some sound design with that. I think that's it. Right, everyone, thanks so much. Please again, just hit like, subscribe, share to your friends and loved ones and all that kind of stuff. Thanks for tuning in and putting up with me. I hope you found this useful. And remember, this is for me. So if there's any comments like, you know, what about this? What about that? Look, this is where I've got to. This is what I'm about. This works for me. I'm really, really happy with it. I can't wait to show you the sort of sounds I've been getting out of this. I'd love to see you all do the same as well. And see what you come up with. Oh, do you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to show you kind of where I started with all of this. Check this out. I'll just quickly run through this with you all, but this is a very old, so this is modular grid, so I can show you kind of like where I started with a lot of this, where I had the VCO6 going into this filter by AJ8 synths, which I loved, and I was using the Batumi to come up with really complex envelope shapes. What else was I using? Yeah, the mix-ups where I was using the muscle still for the for sidechain compression. I had chords going on from Cubic Chord, and I was using the FH2. Ah, that's right, because when I was doing this, I was actually sequencing everything from the Electron, from the Electron machine drum, not machine drum, Octatrack 2. I was sequencing everything from that. Then I progressed, and let's have a look at, what's this one? So yeah, then I carried on using the FH2, and I started using chords by getting 3 plats and I really like using 3 different plats, and because you got loads of different sounds out of them to make chords. And I brought in the piston Honda as well, which gave me awesome like wave shaping and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really dirty. Then I started experimenting using the ESA, and I was using, in fact I still do, I use Bitwig quite a lot. You probably see this on my YouTube channel. I do patch from scratch using Bitwig. I really love it. I think it's one of the most powerful DAWs out there, alongside, you know, the likes of Ableton, Logic and all that. It's definitely up there now, and there's been a pretty big update recently. And so I was using the ESA, and I still have them in the rack behind me. And you'll see there's no envelopes here. So what I did was I was creating all of the envelopes inside of Bitwig, pumping it out through the ESA into all the various places on the modular, and yeah, I was sequencing it all using the grid. You'll notice I've got the Torcido here as well, which is an awesome stereo distortion, which has essentially been now replaced by the what's it called, the Noise Engineering Ruina Virgio, as I mentioned, as you saw earlier. Then yeah, then I started bringing in what did I change up here? Oh yeah, loads of I had 3 overseers at one point I was using, and I had this stereo output, the OOTS triple OTS, as the main output. And now I'm here. This is where I'm at. So if you want to see it on Modular Grid, I'll put a link to that below as well in the chat, and I'll share that. But this is it. This is what it looks like. This is what I've been through today. And yeah, that's I think that's kind of everything you need to know. Like I say, I'd love to see what you're doing. If you've got any modular grid you want to share, put a link in the comments below. I'd like to see what you're doing, any sort of approaches that you've got to live electronic music. I'd really like to hear about that, things that you tend to do when you play live. I want to share some of that with you too. You know, what do I think about when I'm playing live? What are the things that I'm working with? I'd like to talk about that as well in some coming videos as well. Because I think all that side's kind of interesting. I think even if you get all this technology sorted out, there's something that we all tend to do as musicians, and I think we are musicians for sure. You know, what happens when we're on the stage, how we use all of this. So that's really interesting. So I'll probably do a video on that. Anyway, I think that's it. I will say goodbye now because I've been going on for an hour and 13 minutes. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks everyone that's liked this and subscribed. And I look forward to, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night. If I get this patched in time, you'll get, if you're subscribed, you'll get a notification saying that I'm going live. You can find me a lot on Instagram as well, where I'm mainly sort of ranting about this kind of stuff. So if you're on Instagram, go find me on there. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks everyone. Take care, and hopefully see you tomorrow night. Hope you found this useful.